It's time now for my political panel. Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Labor MP Christy McBain join me. Welcome to both of you. And I'll start with you, if I can, Jason Falinski. I think we've just got Christy. We'll get Jason in a minute. Christy, starting with you, Australia's borders will open to foreign and skilled workers and students on Wednesday. There was this pause, but now the government's going forward with reopening. So that delay is now over. Do you think that that's wise? Obviously, there are some concerns still about the Omicron variant, but do we need to reopen?
What we need to be doing is providing businesses and communities with certainty over what is happening in terms of reopening the country and reopening different businesses. And providing certainty means we have to take into account the health advice and stick firm to our guns that the things that we have been doing in states and territories across this country have been keeping people safe to date. So I think it's wise that we now get on and open the country. There are going to be a range of variants that we know will come. We have good vaccination rates, and the measures that are being taken by state and territory governments have been keeping people relatively safe. So I think now is the time to actually open. Businesses definitely need some certainty over what's happening in this country, and I think it's time to move forward.
Okay, so you think it is time. Obviously, we are poised and waiting. In fact, I think it's in about 15 minutes that we'll hear when WA reopens not only to Australia but to the world. January the 31st is a date that's being hotly anticipated, but we'll see. Wait for Mark McGowan to make that determination. Obviously, WA has decided to go a more conservative approach than, say, Queensland, but do you think that's disappointing for the many families still separated?
Look, I think every Premier, every Chief Minister has made a series of decisions over this last 2-year period to keep the people in their states and territories safe. You know, Tasmania wasn't going to open until they had a 90% double vaccination rate. We don't disagree with that. You know, Queensland wanted to wait till they were at 80% in line with the national plan. You know, they've got there now, and they opened, I think, 1 a.m. this morning. Western Australia need to get to that level as well. So I think, you know, every state and territory should be commended for the way they have handled the pandemic, and you know, the constant sniping that we have seen from the government to different states across this country, I think has not been productive and definitely hasn't led to a we're all in this together moment. In fact, what it did was divide us all. So look, I can't imagine there were any easy decisions during this pandemic, but I think state premiers and chief ministers have done a really good job.
Yeah, it has been a really hard decision-making time, Jason Falinski. We are waiting for the WA Premier to make the announcement about when that border reopening date will happen, what it looks like, all of those sorts of details. But we know that it's not going to be till next year. It won't be before Christmas. Queensland obviously is providing us some money shots today of very happy people at the border. Do you think that the more conservative approach WA has taken is reasonable given the new Omicron variant, for instance?
Things I would say. It's disappointing they're not opening their borders before Christmas, because it means that there will be families that are separated for Christmas, and that's heartbreaking, frankly. Secondly, we are very lucky to live in this country because throughout this pandemic, we were able to shut down the economy. We were able to make sure that Australians were looked after, that businesses were supported, etc. And I think finally, you know, we can only hope that we become one country again. But as I said, when Peter Khalil and I were debating this is what you get in federation. You get to see how different jurisdictions deal with this issue and which ones work better and which ones don't. We'll just see in the long term which state had the better response to the pandemic.
It's interesting you say that, the fullness of time. I suppose it depends, Jason Falinski, what your measure is, right? Because, yeah, I mean, WA will say, just pretend to be the Premier now. Look at their death rate. That they would argue that they've actually had a pretty good run. If that is your measure and avoiding people going to hospital, then they have been very successful, right?
Yeah, sure. And there'll be the arguments that they make. And if I were the New South Wales Premier, if I can pretend to be him for a minute, I would say that
pretend.
their economy. Let's pretend. They kept their economy open. They had record number of small businesses continue to keep going. Their economy is growing incredibly quickly, and they're leading Australia in terms of the way that they have dealt with this. And also, and I'm sure Kirsty agrees, Christy, that they had a situation in which, most returning Australians who went overseas to, not for a holiday, but to see sick parents, to see sick children, to see grandchildren they hadn't seen. Almost all of them came through Sydney, and the people of Western Australia, the people of Queensland, owe the people of New South Wales a big debt, and as it turns out, quite a lot of money for the hotel quarantine system. So, these things have been, these are all arguments that people will make, and I think we'll have to wait 12 to 24 months to see which approach worked the best.
Yeah, and it'll, I suppose, depend on what your values are too. There are so many reasons why people, come to those conclusions. Look, I want to move to a couple of other issues. I want to talk about, starting with you if I can, Jason, independent federal MP Andrew Wilkie says the Prime Minister should urge the US President to drop charges against WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange. Do you think he should?
I think we're just in a position, PK, where all of us, especially publicly elected officials, should be, and I'm not criticising Andrew, by the way, should just be very careful with our words. My sense of where this situation is that there has been some furious negotiations behind the scene. There has been quite large movement between the Trump administration and the Biden administration of where we end up now. Mr. Assange, Julian, will face a trial in the United States. If he is found to have committed those crimes, he will serve his sentence in Australia. I think that is quite a significant development, and I think that all of us should be cautious and allow the diplomats to do the work that they do, sometimes, not in public. And I think we should all be quite responsible about what we say from this point forward.
Christy, what's your take on that? Okay, I don't think we can hear you, Christy. Oh, we can now, please. Why don't you start I'll ask the question again, and we'll start again, which is this. What's your take on the Julian Assange matter? Do you think there should be an intervention from our Prime Minister?
Technology in regional areas, it sometimes doesn't go to plan. Look, the situation has gone on for a long time now, and it's time, I think, to step up, and the Morrison government needs to be having those discussions directly with the Biden administration. I think when you've got the sentence commuted for the person who gave that information to Julian Assange has already taken place, we wonder why they're still pursuing Julian Assange himself. So I think, there is some work that needs to be done by the Morrison government here. I think enough time has elapsed that we actually need to get on and make sure that we get him back to Australia or back to a place where he can start to live his life again without this cloud hanging over him.
Yeah, it has been a pretty significant issue that's been going on for so many years now. Just before I let you both go, obviously this South deal with the South Korea military deal is quite significant. Just your thoughts on it, Jason Falinski. Does it demonstrate that Australia is kind of pivoting in the region?
Well, look, I don't think it demonstrates that necessarily. I think what it demonstrates is that we live in a very dynamic region where we have new and emerging dangers that we need to be aware of. We are making sure that our alliances in this region are as strong as they possibly can be, so that we can ensure that the safety and security of the Australian people is assured beyond doubt. And when that is the case, we can be assured beyond doubt that we will not need to use those things that we are currently procuring, and ensuring that our country is as strong as it has always been.
Christy, do you think that the deal and opening up the potential for, moving away from Europe and doing more work with South Korea is a good idea?
Look, it's been clear for a number of years that we needed to focus more heavily on our own region of interest, and coming up with logistic chains that are closer to home. So I think this move will be welcomed by a number of contractors, by defence personnel, and it's about time we started focusing more heavily on our own region.
Thanks to both of you. We're out of time.
Thanks, PK.
Thank you and Merry Christmas.
You too. Liberal MP Jason Falinski and Labor MP Christy McBain.